How many pieces do you think you've collected over the years?
I've collected thousands of pieces. In the years when I did ethnographic collections, I chose very carefully and slowly and singly, I have to say, depending on the type of story I was trying to build. And I did those ethnographic collecting jobs first in 5 years in Peru. So I was traveling slowly there from village to village. A lot of times I was limited to market days when people would come from the surrounding countrysides and they could walk miles and miles, and did, to come to these weekly markets, and I could arrive by vehicle and meet them there. So typically in Peru, the more country people were the ones who made their own fabrics. They weren't so much on a money economy. They made them slowly, sometimes with
Does
their
that mean
own
that they were
wool.
trading the textiles as a kind of currency with each other from village to village?
No, more likely they were trading the wool.
Just the
Wool
raw.
for food.
Mm.
So, and then they'd spin and dye and weave. And it was a non-commercial item in the sense of money didn't change hands. Of course, that's changed in more modern times and in more commercial centers.
But we read about Peru being a really the textile epicenter of South America, and particularly having technologies and maybe not technologies, but just a proliferation of different styles and patterns that you don't really see other places. And did you know that going into Peru? Was that sort of why you chose to go there?
I had just a very vague idea about Peru when I took the first vacation down there in the early 70s. I'd seen a few handmade textiles that a friend brought back from Guatemala. I knew that the Guatemalan textiles were cotton and the Peruvian ones were wool, and the mountains were high, and the lake was called Titicaca, and very little beyond that. So it was a surprise and an unfolding, and a very pleasant one. But
Now, don't they have cotton in Peru as well?
There is a bit of cotton grown on the coast, a very long staple cotton, but it's much less prevalent than all the varieties of wool from the cameloid animals and the sheep, which of course were introduced by the Spanish.
So of all the pieces in Peru, what is the most memorable piece that you can remember? Is there any one in particular that just, sort of wowed you immediately when you saw it?
No, Peru was more of a continuum. I'm sure there were many things that wowed me the very first time, but it was a continuum. I was living there, I was traveling, I was asking questions. Over time I learned Spanish, then even a little Quechua. So the wow factors were more to do with categories of textiles than any single piece. And my first earliest experiences in Peru were with the weaving, often done on a backstrap loom. And later I came to a zone where they not only wove on a backstrap loom, but they wove tapestries. But it's a weaving, it's a regularity, it's a geometry, because basically all the weaving and all the patterns that are formed in those techniques are by threads crossing each other at right angles.
So on that note, do you notice any recurring geometrical or other kinds of patterns that you saw in Peru? Have you seen those occur anywhere else in the world that you've been to?
Some patterns are similar, but I think they're not very similar. And usually people and places have their own distinctive types, so that if you go to a country like Guatemala, you can still distinguish the home village of people because the dress is so different from one place to the next. It's melding as people migrate. And in Peru, it's changing fast right now. As more people come onto a cash economy, they realize that they don't want to spend the time shearing and dyeing and spinning and weaving. They would rather buy a secondhand Nike item